Well, thank you to Adam Henley for making a comment on my last video. It's always nice to get comments and, you know, see new anglers subscribe. So if you haven't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button and please make comment on, you know, future videos so that I can bring and actually answer those comments sometimes in a video. So Adam made the comment that he'd like me to show the actual T-rig a lot more up close and personal. Now I referred everybody to the Tench Fishers YouTube channel, because Tony King is the master at the T-rig. We got a wasp around here now. He is the master on the T-rig, and it really does show how he ties it up. Now each rig we all tie up, you know, we just add our little twist to it. So this is how I do it. I'm just going to show it, but please please head over to the Tench Fishers YouTube. You'll see Tony tying it up. You'll also see him at Mill Lane with Chris Miller on the Tench Masterclass. Please check that video out. It was absolute eye-opener. We all went there in July, helped a few anglers out, and Tony and Chris absolutely ripped the place apart on the T-rig. I think Chris even caught a personal best mirror of just over £40 on that. I was there, I used the worm kebab, and my customer that morning had 8 tench to over, you know, personal best high 8 and a bream, and that was on the worm kebab because that was the rig I was using. But I saw Tony and Chris rip it apart on the T-rig and I thought, I've got to give that a go. And ever since then I've slowly brought it into my fishing, and now I'm pretty much confident, especially at Mill Lane. Those tench have wised up to those big worm baits, and when you've got all that fizzing going on, the T-rig really does sort those tench out. So I'm just going to run through the components you need. First, I use an uncoated braided hook length. This is the smoke screen micro braid 10-pound Corum. You need size 10 hooks. I use the Target Speci beat point, barbless. Just a little tip: always check those hook points on your now. If it digs in, fine, because every now and again you do find you get a duff one. Very if ever with the garden hooks, but I have used other manufacturers and I find that, you know, quite often you can get one in a packet. So just get your hooks, check the point out, and if they're a little bit blunt, you know, it's always good to get one of these little gardener hook doctors in and just, you know, tune that point right in. You need some good braid scissors and a baiting needle. Now Tony uses a blunt one, but I always seem to break a blunt one because I'm forcing it through, so I'm using quite a sharp, very fine captive baiting needle. You'll also need some enterprise. Firstly, the spongy red maggots that, you know, I'll sit there and I have, why would you ever want to use those? But believe me, on the T-rig they work. You need a buoyant enterprise caster. Now when you buy these, make sure they're the pop-up, the buoyant ones, because you can buy sinkers. And a little floats bait stop, tiny little one there. So first things first, as you can see, I've got my phone here, hopefully taking up, you know, some close-up. So the first thing I do is I'm just going to cut about 12 inches of the braid off. Brilliant little pair of scissors those. Thanks Alan for giving those to me, one of my customers. I'm just going to make a loop, overhand loop, which is where I'm going to mount the, always moisten knots please, it's just good habit to get into, just helps them bed in. Making a small loop, cut that tag end off. Okay, as you can see, what we've got there is a small loop. You might be able to see that on the close-up, but there's a reason. There's the loop you can see. Okay, first thing going on there is going to be this spongy buoyant maggot, and what we want is finished product for that caster to be sitting in that little groove at the thick end of that maggot. So we want it to be sitting in there in the shape of a T. Okay, so I'm going to get this baiting needle and I'm going to push that in where that groove is. Now I find with these sharper needles it does get stuck a little bit, and sometimes it's just good just to twist them. So what I'm doing, and then I'm going to pull that out, the thin end. That goes on to your hook length first. So, and as I say, I twist these as I put them on. It does look a bit strange because obviously the needle does pull everything in, but that will all right itself out. So as you can see, first thing's on is the spongy maggot. Next job is to get your buoyant caster and to pierce that through the side. Mind you don't put it in your finger. So there you have it, your buoyant pop-up caster across. Get the loop and add the caster to it. Okay. And as you can see there, they don't look very neat at the moment, but they are almost taking on that T shape. Get your little float stop. These are tiny ones. I don't know why I use such small ones with my fingers and my eyesight, but place that onto the loop, pull the hair up, and then pull your plastic maggot up into position. And there, as you can see, it's the shape, T shape. Okay, next job is to get your hook, size 10, as I say, at best. I have to be careful because on my main club, like Mill Lane, I've got to use a barbless, but on other club that I use, it's barbed. So take that hook length through the back of the eye of the hook, very, very important, through the back of the eye, and then just pull that down so your bait is right on the hook. When I'm using the T-rig, I like to have a short hair and the bait right half, you know, the point of the spongy maggot halfway up the shank, because that bait is just going to be sitting up with the hook down on the deck, so a bit like a snowman rig. So next job, and the lovely thing here is you can just clamp down on your hook bait, your two casters there, or maggots, and then start winding the hook length around the shank. 7 to 10 times is enough, no more. And then take your tag end back through. I have to get some bifocal glasses here. Through the back of the hook again, and then just pull that down. Okay, the reason you go through the back both times is it creates an angle off the hook point. If you're using mono or fluorocarbon, that is a lot more exaggerated, and that aggressive angle of that hook length off that eye just helps turn the hook and create a much better hook hold. So you'll see a lot of carp anglers doing their very, very best to get that angle, you know. So there you have it. And as you can see, from now on we can just adjust that to create that T, and what you'll find is that hook bait on that nice limp braided hook length will just sit and waft above that hook, and that hook is flat on the deck. Okay, just moving on. I like to make my hook lengths about 7 inches right to the tip of the caster. So I just mark out 7 inches and then fold the remaining hook length over, and then I create a loop. And this is very important, to create a figure of 8 loop, because then there's no chance of it slipping. So I've got the loop, the overhand knot loop, and then I fold it to make a figure of 8. Okay, so loop 180 degrees, figure of 8, and then I take the tag end through. Now I don't know if you can see that, it's a figure of 8. Bit of moisture on the hook. Can you see that figure of 8 there? Bang. Tie it down, snip off the braid, and there is one hook link made. This is actually a barbed hook, so this is alright for one venue I fish, not for the other. Gets a bit confusing sometimes. So yeah, as you can see, I'm just marking that out, 7 inches, and that is your T-rig. Absolutely devastating. So what I'm going to do now is just to move on to how I fish that, the actual rig, including why I use a leader and inline lead as opposed to a helicopter rig. Okay, let me just show you the rig I'm using and why I prefer to use a T-rig on, you know, with the use of an inline lead semi-fixed bolt rig as opposed to a helicopter rig. I find when I use the T-rig on a helicopter rig, what you'll find is these two maggots in the shape of a T, when they come back, they're like a little motor kind of propeller swinging around, and what you'll find is that will hit your main line and quite often tangle when it coming in. Gives you no confidence if you wind in a tangled rig, and it just buggers up your hook link. So I've come away from helicopter rigs when I'm using the T-rig. If I was going to use the T-rig on a helicopter rig, then I'd probably be tying it up with fluorocarbon hook length and then a braided hair just to get the flexibility, but a little bit more technical than what you need to do. So I'm going to start off with the leader. This is lead free, and it's one of the Gardner 45 £1 metre cam flex. Okay, the reason I use a leader is through a couple of reasons. Firstly, at Mill Lane we have a lot of pike, and if you're using worm kebab, they come in and they bite straight through your main line. So I've just got into the use of using a leader all the time. Not that you're going to have many pike picking up the T-rig, but it has happened. So one, it just protects you against pike, especially if you're using a worm kebab. So if you're using a leader, then these ones just come loop to loop, okay? But when you're tying your main line onto this little loop, be really, really careful. Now, I use, and I've just bought the Fox Carp Mono 12 £, line. It's really cheap. It's about £6 for 1,000 metres. It's really abrasion resistant, and it's just a good line. But I would say if you're using a leader, please don't use £10 line. Go for an abrasion resistant £12, even a £15 line if you're carp fishing, because there's no advantage using a lesser break and strain line. So when you actually tie your main line to one of these loops, don't go using a 6-turn blood, even though you wet it down, because it just doesn't seem to bed down onto these loops. So use a grinner knot or a uni knot on those, but please, whatever knot you tie, make sure you moisten it down and make sure it's bedded down, because sometimes you can snap them really easy. So there we go, lead free leader, 1 metre. The other reason is it pins everything down in your swim, so 1 metre behind your hook bait, in that, you know, carefully baited area that you've done, you can create, you know, just pin it right down so it's really discreet, a bit of stealth. So and another reason I use it is on one of the pits I use, I've got a lot of zebra mussels, and zebra mussels just go through mainline really easy, so it just gives you a little bit of security against, you know, snags, pike teeth, zebra mussels, etc. So and then down to the business end, I'm using an inline lead. Size of the lead depends on how far you're casting, what the bottom is made up of. Obviously you need a bigger lead to cast further, but then if you're fishing over silt, then you want to use a lighter lead, because you don't want that burying in. In there I've got one of the Gardner, I can't see where they are, quick lock swivels, so I can take that hook link off nice and easy, and then I can change it during the session to maybe a worm kebab. I've even changed it to a buoyant caster on the hair, and then I've super glued 3 real casters to that. Often that is a very good rig as well, but I'm not going to go into it today. Or even if I want to just take it off and change it to a smaller hook, let's say a size 14 with 3 real maggots on, if I've got tench bubbling and I'm not catching, then I can at least have that, you know, chance of taking that off really quickly and getting back out there. The other thing is, if you're winding on a gravel pit, check your hook point all the time, sharpen it if needed, but sometimes you find that hook point has turned right over. You need to check your hook length, you know, your hook length. You can change it really quickly, get that rod back out to maximize that feeding period. I've got a little, again, an anti-tangle sleeve. Again, it's a Gardner one. These are quite long, I just cut them down. That goes on your hook link, and then I can just put that hook link, or hook length I always call it, onto there, pull that over. The sleeve safeguards that coming off. The swivel goes into the lead, pops out. It's quite tight, that is, but obviously when it's in the water and there's moisture on there and water on there, it comes out a lot easier. A semi-fixed bolt rig, let's say, which is very easy to change. So that's it, 7-inch hook link, T-rig. That just sits up off your hook's on the ground. And I know Tony uses a PVA stick, and he actually threads that, a ground bait and other particles onto there. That's great, again, if you're using a helicopter rig and a braided hook link, that will save you getting tangled. In my case, I just use a little bit of PVA. I tie up a tiny little bag with half a handful of casters in. You've probably got about 75, 100 casters in there. I then just nick, very carefully, I nick the PVA bag onto that hook, twist it and nick it on again. And as you can imagine, you cast out, that rig goes down to the bottom. As soon as it hits bottom, do not move it, because what happens is all the casters in that PVA bag will just create a lovely little circle of casters. Some will be covering the hook. Sometimes you wind in, you've got half a caster on your hook point or on the shank of the hook, and your bait will be wafting just above. So a tench will come along, see those casters, and believe me, tench love casters, suck all that in, including the T-rig, the buoyant pop-up baits and your hook. Then they are created to actually eat those casters and spit out any rubbish like little stones, or in this case your hook and your hook bait, and as that goes, spit that out, or they move forward, that hook link tightens, they move forward, and that hook point 9 times out of 10, or probably 95 times out of 100, will be right in the middle of the lip. So it is an absolutely fantastic rig, highly effective, one that I have loads and loads of confidence in. So make a few up, cast them out, because they pretty much work everywhere. But what I would say is try and get a better bait, a particle out there, dead maggots and casters and a little bit of hemp, only a little bit of hemp, nice and accurately, and fish this over the top with a little PVA bag of casters, and believe me, you're going to catch a lot more tench on it.